way to quiet the room. I want to say welcome to this informal gathering. The committee members that were put in charge of creating this draft ordinance thought it would be a good idea to just have an informal gathering so that they could answer questions about, what's in the new ordinance and maybe the whys, or attempt to answer questions. If you have statements, opinions, anything like that, either please keep it short or save it for the public hearing. This is to answer questions. Wait, got any questions?
I have a question. Under 3.9, it sounds like, okay, I have accessory dwelling and my principal office. But it sounds like I could rent my house too at the same time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Ed. Bed and breakfast, under definition, section 2, item 3. You let lodging right up to 8 rooms or rent no more than 20 per it. On page 14, 341B, it says provide up to 6 rooms for rent no more than 16 kids. I don't know if you guys got that, but it seems contradicting.
That is the definition. The first one you mentioned on page 6 is the state legal definition of a bed and breakfast. And so the definition, according to our town attorney, needed to be consistent with state. But when it comes to regulating it, we can limit the number of rooms. So
that means you're going to change what's on page 14 to reflect what's listed underneath that definition.
no, that
It just seems confusing, that's all.
I understand it's confusing. That's originally they were consistent and the lawyer said we needed to have a definition that was compliant with state definition of bed and breakfast. There's another definition, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, that we needed to change to be compliant with the state definition. So it is confusing, but that's the reason why it's different.
All right, I'll answer my question now. And I also have a comment on apartment and condominiums being allowed as conditional use in low density districts like W1, W2, and S1 as conditional use permits, which typically in this town is a permitted permit, which they had to do it. Considering those are low density districts, I don't think it's wise to have apartment and condominiums in those zones. And the same thing, I have concerns about events being located outside the commercial zone, but maybe I'll save those comments for the public hearing at the end.
I attended our meeting on the 5th of July. And I wasn't able to ask a question and get a response because maybe that's in a public comment. Now that we have this informal gathering, it would be nice to hear from each one of the commissioners present. What is it, the issue we're trying to solve and why? I haven't heard that really articulate. I have the document, but I don't know, maybe from each of your perspective, it'd be interesting to hear. What is you're trying to solve and why?
Well, I think there's a couple of areas that we're looking at. Events, for one thing. There was nothing in our ordinance on events, whether they're allowed or not. So we decided to look at events and to allow them in certain areas and with certain limitations. Long-term rental have always in our zoning ordinance required a permit, but there was no permit form for long-term rentals. So we're looking at correcting that. Short-term rentals, we're looking at trying to provide the capability of people that own homes on the island to be able to rent those short-term to help pay for their upkeep, to keep that house or cottage, whatever, in the family, to help them to afford that. But at the same time, trying to prevent overdevelopment with investors coming in and buying up properties and renting them short term. So we have some restrictions on multiple property owners. So those are a couple of things we're looking at, and just to try and clean up some of the language in the present rental ordinance that was a little bit confusing.
The current ordinance that's already in place, the things that you just mentioned, a couple changes to that, but then suffice, I would think. It seems like we're really pulling a lot more information in that's unnecessary. And I guess that's where I'm trying to see where you came up with the logic behind it. And the other thing that I thought we were going to wait for was the comprehensive plan done. And have the comprehensive plan present to you guys, and then we were gonna look to see what came out of that to make a decision on any type of short-term, long-term rental ordinance. Now it seems like we started this before the comprehensive plan's even been adopted. Seems like we're cart before the horse.
We've been working on this for several months, along with the comprehensive plan. We've been working alongside their suggestions. The comp plan public hearing is before the public hearing for this. Ours is gonna be after, so that the comp plan will be, their draft will be, a lot closer to being done. And then, like I said, this is all going along with what is in the plan.
In reading through the minutes that I've seen, don't see anything regarding short-term rental with the consideration concern that has come out of the current comprehensive plan that is there. So why all of a sudden this, if you're working in conjunction with them, wouldn't that have come out of those discussions?
With what they have been putting together.
So Mike, the draft of the comprehensive plan has 2 pages of short-term rental stuff on pages 60 and 61 of the draft. Essentially, the recommendations are consistent with what this ordinance is proposing. I mean, if people want me to read it, I'm happy to do it, but otherwise you can just look at what the comprehensive plan draft says on pages 60 and 61.
My point being, if you guys just got a comprehensive plan 2 weeks ago, but you've been doing this all along. And I guess that's what I'm saying. How do you have both happening concurrently?
Because there's communication going on.
Comprehensive plan that I happen to see, not one member of the TPC attended any of those meetings in terms of public being there. How was this information?
I was at a lot of the steering committee meetings.
If you're not recorded on the meeting minutes.
As a member of the public, you might not be recorded.
I was there.
And the reality is, as town administrator, I staff all the town committees except for the town plan commission. But Ed and I share an office. We communicate all the time. I'm the liaison that carries information back and forth among committees and the town board. So I'm the conduit for a lot of that information. Information gets shared among committees where it's relevant, whether it's the TPC and the steering committee for the comp plan, whether it is the affordable housing committee, the energy committee, all those kind of committees that have proposals for projects that would be influencing the comprehensive plan, would be influenced by the comprehensive plan, or are working concurrently. We have a lot of great volunteers in this town. We're doing a lot of work. And so we are just making sure that they all are aware of what each other is doing and working consistently with each other's goals and influencing each other's goals.
I just want to say to you, Mike, that I'm, as a member of the Town Planning Commission, a relatively new one, I'm benefiting from these types of forums and this Q&A just as much as you. And I am, from my understanding, this these amendments are made to reflect the changes that have been happening over the last 3 years, especially in terms of Airbnbs and short-term rentals and people kind of investing in short-term rentals as a revenue stream, especially during the pandemic. And how that also coincides with a housing shortage all over the country and the world. But I lost my train of thought, but I think that I lost my train of thought. I'll come back to me if I think of it. But I have 2 questions. On page 12. 3, 2, 5. It seems to say that the owner can't live in their house. Unless they have a rental permit. It says owner and or designated. I think it's worded wrong, because I think it says that the owner can't live.
What section are you talking about?
3, long-term rentals, number 5, it says the owner,
Cause I have number 12 is boarding houses, page 12.
page 12,
Yeah, so tell me the section you're on, it's page 9.
2, long-term rentals,
Okay.
number
2.2.
5.
Yeah, that is worded a little bit weird.
And then I wondered about, my second question was about grandfathered use, grandfathered people.
As far as short-term rentals, there's only one on the island that was grandfathered in.
But I think this would make somebody else too.
Where is that?
For sure.
Fairway Suites,
Just grandfather section.
right? I was,
I think I'm not sure what your point is on here.
well, I was making sure that Elena wasn't gonna lose her rights to.
Correctly, that is grandfathered in under this language.
Okay, and then,
Where is that language? Sorry.
and then, Fairway Suites has more than 6.
And then it's also more than 400 square feet, and so it's under hotels and hotels. So it has.
I don't know.
3 rooms, so it's 400 square feet.
We talked about that up at the golf course. Herzl property.
So I just wondered.
All right, we'll make sure that is covered. I mean, we did talk about it.
Okay.
In this, I'm not sure what the solution was, so we'll have to look back on that. Thank you.
I remembered my second half of my thought, sorry. I was just gonna say that short-term rentals aren't inherently bad, and I also wanted to just, specifically, I guess I'm speaking to you, but to everyone that as a TPC member, I'm representing you and taking into account all of your opinions and questions and concerns, so. And also working with the steering committee to have all these decisions reflect the comprehensive plan. So that's in my best interest and your best interest. Move forward with that in mind.
I want to circle back to what Mike Rasmus was talking about. We've got right now at least 4 really good committees that are working on things. There's the Affordable Housing Committee, there's the Comprehensive Plan Committee, there's the TPC on rental ordinances, and then there's also TPC on zoning ordinance. That's all. And wouldn't it make sense to make sure that the comprehensive plan gets finished and adopted first? You know, maybe the Affordable Housing Committee comes up with their recommendations so it can fit into the comprehensive plan. You know what I'm saying? I mean, how, rather than having a rental ordinance adopted, or I know it's going to a public hearing, but before it gets adopted, shouldn't there be resolution on comprehensive plan, affordable housing before this document means as much as it will after that gets settled? You know, does that make any sense? You know what I'm saying? That there's.
You don't have to do it twice.
It was, I mean, it's, I mean, if affordable housing, well, comprehensive plan probably is the thing that has to be in place, because that's gonna direct how the island goes forward. And I mean, the comprehensive plan, the 10-year plan on going forward. And within the 10-year plan, there's gonna be affordable housing, there's gonna be rentals, things like that, so just consider when they finally get adopted. So having these question and answers, it's great. It's just a matter of which comes. I don't think it would be right to adopt a rental ordinance before the comprehensive plan or affordable housing stuff is done. It's opinion.
I got a couple questions. I'm looking over here at this, under the short-term rental section, and it says the same range of flexibility is not available to investors. Property owners who rent multiple properties in residentially zoned districts. In practice, investors who are renting residential properties primarily as a revenue producing business and not as a home. These owners can designate one property and only one that they intend to rent. And then the other ones they can do for no more than every 7 days. And my question is why? Why are you trying to limit small business? Because the only this is limit is small people like Claire and myself who are trying to build ourselves a generational wealth, which is hard to build on the island. It's a really hard economy. You have to find something and work really hard at it. And it seems like I'm directly going to be punished under this by limiting the business at the rentals that I have. And why is the town trying to do that? I mean, big business will have no problem if big business wants in here and wants to invest, they'll have no problem finding loopholes away around any paperwork you put out here. The only people it's gonna limit are small people. And this is directly gonna limit my future business growth plan, which I already have had in place. So am I gonna be grandfathered in? I guess is my number one question. Am I gonna be grandfathered in from these arbitrary distinctions, or am I gonna be held to the same rule that you're gonna hold some billionaire investor to?
Wait, did you say what you do?
Two.
The context, they,
I mean, it directly says, and it says the nature of property owners don't play games. I mean, give me a break. Nobody's playing games, we're running businesses here. The only people playing games, it sounds like, are these committees. They're not taking, I mean, it's not even taking into account. You know, how I'm operating my business, or one of my businesses on this island, that is directly benefiting the island only. I mean.
Thank you for the question, Clayton. Can we answer it? Can we answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just.
All right, I mean, because the opinions and the long comments are for the public hearing.
Well, that's my question. Am I gonna be grandfathered in?
Well, I guess first thing I would say is that under state law, the town can ban all rentals of less than 7 days.
Just because you can, why would you?
Because that's what the state law says. We are being more lenient in allowing people to rent their properties short term for less than 7 days.
Why would you, but my question is, why would you want to take that away from all the people who can't afford to come up here and stay for 7 days? They can't leave their homes for 7 days. So all these people who want to come visit the island can only stay for 2 nights or 3 nights. You're saying, no, you're not welcome on Madeline Island anymore. Because we don't want to allow homeowners to have the opportunity to make money. We don't want to allow that as the town committee, because maybe you guys already have yours and you don't want the rest of us to have ours.
You want an answer?
I'm giving you
Okay.
the context to my question. You understand, because,
Can you let him finish?
well, I'm gonna have my back and forth now, sorry.
Okay. But let him
I need
finish.
my questions answered, but I need to make sure what I'm stating is being understood.
Well, part of what you're stating is inaccurate. It is not forbidding people from renting properties for less than 7 days. It's forbidding people who rent multiple properties as revenue producing properties, not as homes.
Why?
That's us.
Because that's the distinction that is being made.
Why do you want to regulate? That's my question.
Find a balance between people who have one home that they're renting to keep in their
Yep.
family and people who are using homes not as homes, but as hotels. And
Their homes with the
the
people who
fun-
stay here.
they are not, they're business uses of residential property.
One of the houses I have is 15.
Claire, do you want an answer or do you not want an answer? Please,
I want an
we're
answer,
trying to be
sorry.
civil, okay, but we're getting cut off every time we try to give you an
Because
answer.
your answers are unacceptable.
Well, that's a different story. If you don't like our answers, That's part of a give and
This
take.
is what happens, this is public, so let's see, carry on.
So the fundamentals of the zoning ordinance. What the community survey from the comprehensive plan shows is that people of this island want business activity restricted to the commercial district. Short-term rental properties are a business use of residential property in residential districts. That is not changing. However, what this proposal does in trying to meet what the current zoning ordinance is and what the overwhelming preference of the community is.
But the people who build out the results of the community.
Well,
Hey, some of us work all the time. We don't have time for these things, so. I'm sorry, it's incomplete data, I know this, because I've spoken with many people who didn't fill that out. So I'm here representing them.
any other questions?
Well, the comment to follow up on that is you said that there was some survey from the comprehensive plan that's what led to some of this. But the comprehensive plan has not yet been adopted. That's why I feel strongly that the comprehensive plan should be adopted 100% into. By the town board and everybody has to before any ordinance relating to it gets adopted. It's just a sequence of events.
Robin.
I can just start on the timing of the Q, I think it's great. Why now? This should have been done prior to getting our input. All of a sudden, there's a document for it, so none of us have any ability to ask a question for, because they're having a town meeting or a public hearing.
Well, we had a public,
Backwards.
we had a public hearing on the original draft. And we listened to everybody's opinions.
We can't, it's a different.
A public hearing is not a place where you get answers.
No.
The public hearing is a time for the public to make statements. We took the information that was spoken at that public hearing and adapted it back into this resolution. So we did listen to what people said, and we did change the rental ordinance.
As I recall, I gave you 14 letters of objection. That not going anywhere?
You only get more draconian. It's not, that's.
Those were all considered when we looked
Of
at.
course, they're considered, but didn't go anywhere. Good. Be more.
Question, so basically, if you have. A person or family, if you're owning more than one. Properties for rental. If they each made each property an LLC. They would be able to do it.
Not according to the document, they said any ownership interest, if it's an LLC trust, doesn't matter. They're limiting it to.
So-
If you have a minority interest in another property.
Unless the LLC owns those LLCs.
Wow.
Is this affordable, is this regarding affordable housing also, that's right, I feel this is right. I don't know that it is affordable housing, for one thing, we have 55 units, 99% are not even winterized. So where do you get, how does that work?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, there's an underlying thing about affordable housing. That's where this is coming from. Survey that you sent out.
Well, we're looking at what the comprehensive plan steering committee, what they recommended, what came out of the
You
survey.
you haven't got that document.
That's right. It just,
We do. That's something I worked on.
weeks ago, that's my point is.
Park before the horse.
One question follow up, please. Like, are you gonna answer this question, are you grandfathering in?
Current ordinance does not grandfather anybody in, no.
Thank you.
Wow.
So you're just gonna ruin this. For the fun of it.
For whose business? For whose interest? For, my question is, for whose business interests are you going to put these draconian regulations in place? That cause it so that only us and a small other group of people who have managed to crawl up out of the pit of poverty. I mean, I used to live in low-income housing, so to whose benefit is this? Because it's clearly not to ours, and it's clearly not to a lot of people who wrote letters. So
The people who live here,
whose benefit are these parks regulations for?
Or do you just have something personal against us?
Yeah,
Because I would like to know that, because it certainly seems like it.
it really does, because my considerations don't seem, my comments,
We're here every day of every year, on and on, keeping this island going.
my comments were not taken into consideration in any of this.
None of them were.
It doesn't appear.
Nobody's comments were taken into consideration.
Why? I'm wondering.
There's no reflection of it.
You're just going off the paperwork that you have in front of you, not the public comment it appears. And how come that it's not as important? How come public comment is not as important as the paper?
I will answer one thing.
Yeah, answer
I've
one. Why not?
I've heard a couple of things that nothing changed because of the public hearing. The simple matter is the original proposal required conditional use permits for short-term rentals anytime there's a new owner or a new short-term rental or property lapse. That has been taken out, and it was taken out in response to public comment. That's one very significant change that restricts the town's ability to regulate the growth of short-term rentals. And so for people to ignore that is simply not true.
Okay, thank you. But
Peter's trying.
I have a doubt question. You said there is no grandfather. I was grandfathered something over 30 years ago to have a beauty shop in our house across the street. Now, does that get taken away from him?
It has nothing to do with the short-term rental of a property.
No, it doesn't, but you're saying that
There's no grandfathering in of what people are using short-term rentals for. That's what I understood the question to be.
Yeah.
This is the rental ordinance. There are how many properties on the island that have grandfathered conditions or non-conforming lots of record and those kind of things. Those are not being affected by this.
You just say the has a grandfather, but Amy has a
That's
question.
because it's in here.
So you put it in for one person.
No, because it's in the existing ordinance. It's not changing.
The renting of that, accessory dwelling or whatever,
Yeah, that's in the existing ordinance. It's not changing.
it's eliminating it. It's according to this document.
It's not. It's grandfathered in under the current document.
For a person if they change, if they change property. If the person who has it now, if they change rental, the next person can't do that same thing.
Correct. That's the language.
That
That's
does allow it, and you're taking it away.
No, the language doesn't change from the existing ordinance in that situation.
It's,
I'm really behind on this whole thing, and I'm trying to speak really with you, but it's earlier when you got, I was at the last hearing. What are the main restrictions that are going to be in place for islanders who own multiple properties? Just give me like the biggest chunks, like what is Claire and Clayton's largest issue with this or these guys?
Well, one of the restrictions that we're eliminating is the ability to have an event legally.
I saw that. I saw that.
So
You know,
it's
and
not over 100 people, right? Or just
we
events
had to pick a number.
Okay. So it's events. What is the other major?
Restriction, that's one of the things you're granting, what's one of the restrictions is her question.
The big one is instead of limiting all rental properties on the island to 7 days or more, we're only limiting it to the ones that have multiple, to try and prevent investors from coming in here and buying up.
Maybe that's also.
Well, and you buy up the next 10 houses that come up for sale and turn them into short-term rentals.
2 days.
You know.
The active building has to be 7
See, that you guys are trying to cut down on this, sorry.
It's insane.
I mean, is this
And you're not
in
giving.
stone?
No,
It's a proposal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just a.
And there's a public hearing in 2 weeks.
Oh, boy.
And then
I mean,
town plan commission will consider.
it sounds like you could consider people who were like, you know, corporations, but a cap, some sort of monetary cap of income. I don't,
There's no way to regulate it, it's illegal, I mean, it's discriminatory. Say.
And any changes we make to this?
Yes.
It's a draft.
Yeah, it's a draft.
Yeah, that's right.
Can I ask for clarification on what Melissa said? Just to check that I have the same understanding.
It's possible to grandfather us in. Yeah. I've lived here my whole life.
I just have. Could I ask I have clarification on what Molly said, my understanding is, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to check my understanding. That you can have multiple rental properties, you can only have one that you can rent less than 7 days, you can have more than that, but the minimum rental period would be 7 days. Is that correct?
According to this draft.
According to that draft?
Or one rental every 7 days. If it's less than 7 days, you can
Okay.
rent someone for less than 7 days, but it's what Bayfield has in their ordinance, for example. Except for they have, you can't rent it all for less than 7 days.
That's not enforced. No.
That's their,
And they're on
that's
the
their
mainland,
issue.
so they can hotels,
How are we gonna enforce it?
they're on the mainland,
Not on Nora.
totally different place.
I have a question for Bella on vacation, Claire and Clayton, anyone else that is worried about this. Do you guys have any ideas for ways that you can, limit all the properties on the island being bought up and turned into short-term rentals? And you still run your business? Do you see there? I mean, I know you're upset and I totally understand why, but I'm curious if you have any ideas of how to find a balance.
Yeah, we're back to the USA where things are legal, would be one cool thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I don't think there's an issue with the town regulating. I think that's important, we have those discussions. What it seems like right now is there wasn't a discussion, and all of a sudden, 2 or 3 people are making a decision for an ordinance, and that's a big change.
I totally understand, I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
and I think that if we would have these discussions before, after that meeting, which I thought that's the road we were going. Pull a group of people in from the community, Claire Clayton, if you want to come from our group, and start talking about how do we regulate, what are the problems we're trying to solve, I guess that was my original question.
Yeah.
There are problems, we as a company chose not to have, we don't allow parties at our properties. So that was a business choice. But if Claire and Clayton have a property or someone else does and they want to have an event. If we're trying to regulate that, and we're only trying to regulate them because it's short term, what about the person that has a wedding down the street from me and has 100 people, that's not a short term rental, and they wreck the neighborhood? Why aren't we looking at that as well? How come you're committing just to short term rental people? Shouldn't this be an ordinance for the community? And it seems to me, you're targeting people, you're targeting investors. It doesn't seem the right application.
And weddings bring money to every business on the town. A wedding brings money to every single business, starting with the ferry, ending with the ferry, and every business in between.
Doesn't the town park allow weddings out there? I mean, people get married at the town park all the time.
Yep, and people pay a fee to do that,
Perfect.
which is exactly what this proposal
And I saw that.
does
That
for
was good.
short-term rentals. And Mike, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. But if someone has a private party on their own property.
Yeah.
It's not a rental property. The town does not regulate what you can do on your own
If
property.
if my son or daughter got married and I have to have a rental permit, I would have to go through this process, what you're saying, my own property for my own son or daughter. I would have to get paid $125 when the person right next door to me.
If it's a rental property, yes. If it's not a rental property, no.
See, and I think that's wrong. Personally, I think that's a wrong use of property rights.
Well, again, people can agree or disagree. One of the fundamental foundations behind this proposal is that all of these activities, events, short-term rentals, are business uses of residential property in residential neighborhoods. And
There
so,
was some discussion about that. We had that in my last letter.
Mike,
So
I'm not interrupting you. Do you mind being polite for a few seconds? Thank you.
This is
Okay.
our livelihood we're talking about.
So. Again, one of the fundamental foundations is these are business uses of residential properties. And therefore, it is the ability of the town to regulate it. We are trying to regulate it in a way that strikes a balance. So whether people believe it's a balance, that's what part of this discussion is, but that's why it's being done, because it's a business use of a residential property, which is in and of itself a variation or I don't want to use a technical term, but it's not allowed in the zoning ordinance without special permission, okay? And so this is special permission to do it, and we're trying to figure out a balance, how to do it in a way that makes sense for the island as a whole and for individuals.
There's a Supreme Court ruling out there that I addressed in my letter to the group in the March meeting. There is some legislation out there, some court decisions that disagrees with exactly what you said. Now, and you don't have to get into it. Don't interrupt me. I didn't remember.
I'm stopping.
I'm just saying, there is case law out there that is already precedent. So you have that opinion, but there's also other opinion out there as well. So I just hope the town's not setting itself up open to lawsuits.
And so
Class action.
And so we discussed that opinion that many of you shared at the public hearing in March with our town attorney.
Sure.
The reality is that was a language in a homeowners association covenant that has nothing to do with the town's ability under state statute to regulate short-term rentals. It is at best a tangential influence on this. Our town attorney does not believe that the court decision in that homeowners association covenant language case has anything to do with our ability. He believes that this ordinance meets the definition of the state statute and the spirit of the state statute.
How much of attorney fees have we spent on this?
$200.
Oh. Please,
Marie's had her hand up.
that's stupid.
I have a question, this is a member of the public, about how, if there was any deliberation about including language to differentiate between island businesses and corporations coming in and buying up properties. I think that's like the big issue here that we're discussing. So in terms of making these decisions, if there was anything you considered about like proving that people live here for X amount of time, or that they do contribute to the island economy, or if there's anything that would help, I think, to provide some clarification on differentiating between the, because I think all of us, I think I can speak for everyone saying that we don't want big investment firms coming in and buying properties.
Exactly.
And so, and I'm not coming at you guys, I love you guys, but I'm just curious.
Our lawyer's opinion is that state law does not allow us to differentiate where an owner lives, where a property owner lives.
Okay. Is there any? Go ahead.
Is there any other distinction that we'd be able to make if we can't use like residency? Is there a possibility we could explore another distinction, or is it kind of, is it considered discriminatory to make any distinction?
Or maybe
options.
and that's something along lines like a CUP or in like that vein, start to make special accommodations or.
Well, again, the original proposal had a conditional use permit process built in, and it was roundly criticized at the first public hearing.
So instead of that, you're just saying, well, just regulate, over-regulate as much as we can. I get it.
My question relating to Clayton, he obviously owned 4 or 5 properties. Can he sell one to his son and then his son owns one? Could he sell one to me and then I rent it out? Then there wouldn't be one owner of 7 properties, right? So is there?
So it's different LLCs and having each LLC.
Well, no, I mean, he can sell it to his son or he can sell it to me and I can rent it out, right? So I don't want to sell it. I don't want to talk about it.
Can I ask for clarification again? In this draft, people would still be able to rent out multiple properties. There's just a limit on time for them if they have more than one. Or there's.
It's just a discrimination against how long you can rent out. Like your other, like I can rent out one property for 40 nights. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is how I can rent out one property that's not commercial zone for as many nights as I want, as few or as many up to 29. But then the other property would be no less than one rental per 7 days or once in 7 days.
Well, if you rent it for 3 or 4 days, it's supposed to sit vacant for the rest of the 7 days.
For 4 days or for 7 days?
But if, in the 7-day period,
Yeah.
you're only allowed to have one
One
rental.
3-day rental.
Or
Okay.
7 day
So
rental.
it would, okay. So I can still rent it out for 3 nights.
Yes, but it needs to be sit vacant for the next 4.
Okay,
You can rent this like one party.
so you're saying I can't make money those other 4 nights, those 4 nights stop.
That's
My income of those 4 nights.
That's according to.
According to the wording of this.
Yeah, and what Wisconsin state law
I'll make
allows.
sure you're on the record, say that.
There's nothing on the record tonight.
Well, everybody here heard it.
Yeah, well, it's what's in this draft.
I appreciate it.
Can you tell me what the definition of a home is in this draft ordinance? I don't see it listed anywhere. What is a home?
Yeah, what is a home?
Not in your definitions, but you addressed it a number of times again. I'd like to know what your definition of a home is.
Can I add to that question? Because, can I add to that question? Because it's just fascinating to hear the discussion, because what we're really talking about, it might be, this is a great thing, but it doesn't actually have what we're talking about, which is what I might call an investment rental dwelling. So it's not and so it's not clearly defined. It's an investment rental dwelling. Everybody here has defined it as a business, which is clear. And so then if we can put another role that says investment rental dwelling, then we could be really clear about what it is we're trying to do. And in a certain kind of way, it identifies it as a business. When I got this draft the other day, I then I had to go read the whole plan about who needs a CUP and not. And so then once you identify it as an investment rental dwelling, call it what you want, then it allows us to understand that for other businesses like you have, you're doing, there's certain restrictions about what can happen in a residential area versus a commercial area. And the beginning of the document on page 1 and 2 identifies, as I read it, there were 51 permits for short-term rentals held by investors, and 33 were in residential districts, which is different than in the commercial districts. So everybody seems okay. You can have an investment rental dwelling in a commercial district, and nobody cares. But then, as you point out, and I'm very supportive of your statement that these are businesses, but then we have to decide where these businesses fit within the broader zoning. I mean, we'll try to look at the zoning map and see what businesses are close to and what controls who gets a CUP for what. That surprised me, because then on the back, you don't really see investment rental dwelling on here, so you can't really understand what the restrictions are on in terms of a CUP or a permitted thing. And this came up for me last night when I was listening. You're talking about the comprehensive plan and how this fits in with the comprehensive plan. And I was fascinated last night as somebody wants to build 30 new houses with a bunch of investment and all that kind of stuff for the affordable housing. But this is sort of and this doesn't fit into that. This doesn't interweave with that, the affordable housing. Somebody pointed out earlier that this is sort of the antithesis of getting to the affordable housing approach. So we have to balance that, and maybe one way to think about balancing it is to really identify these as a business. And then how do we balance the needs of these business owners
And
Local business over there.
independent, I mean, it came up yesterday that, you know, well, it might be a local person owning that, you gotta put restrictions in place, so somebody in the low rent housing can't own it forever and ever, resell it and stuff that's happened on some island somewhere else. And I mean, these are real important issues to be able to talk about and to try to figure out how we might best balance the needs of affordable housing on one hand and businesses who, I mean, it was already compared to a hotel. We don't have hotels here, but we have this instead, but right, that's a good comparison. It's like a hotel, and hotels are have different, you know, hotel and motel has a different sort of thing on this grid, because we recognize it as a housing type business. So this would allow us a way to think about this, that might, the conversation. Because you know, if somebody owns the house next to mine and all of a sudden starts having events every weekend, for that in an R, whatever district I happen to live in. Well, thanks. So that's different. Then well, that's not fair to the other people who are there. So I mean, I was surprised to see that thing, the event thing. Because and that's different than when your son or daughter, I hope so, gets married on your properties, because that's nice. But it's but to do that, this would, you know, potentially be a lot of disruption in non-commercial zones.
The commercial zone have an advantage at this point. I don't think that's fair at all.
Pardon me?
Well, this is not about the commercial area, this is about residential areas, but now the commercial area has a better advantage for more income.
Well,
And they don't have the space, if they decide not to go to commercial.
okay, but then this becomes a discussion about what businesses you want to allow in residential areas, and that is not the discussion value.
None of us were ever asked. Participating in something like this, we have a document ready to go to public hearing.
Okay, but then in the document, this part of the discussion would come head to head with the discussion about affordable housing and the quality of life. You know, there was a slide yesterday of what people wanted, and I was too small to read, but I think quality of life is one of the things that people want to maintain the nature and that's an important issue for a lot of people. And so trying to maintain that, this is why it's important. There would be a part of the comprehensive plan, but we have to look at it carefully about the effects on the affordable housing issue, on the other things that are in the comprehensive plan that people say they want to have.
I know there isn't a definition for house or home, but there is a definition for dwelling. So maybe if you want to know what a home is, you have to look and see what it is dwelling. Just want to break it down a little further. It's a primary dwelling, seasonal dwelling, something like that. And for the C1 zone, yeah, you can do things in a C1 zone you can't do in a low density zone or a residential zone. But there's trade-offs. That C1 is commercial residential, it's not just commercial. So you're gonna get more noise, you're gonna get more congestion, all that stuff. So there's a trade-off. If someone wants to come up and party like it's 1975, they probably wouldn't be doing it in an R1 zone or a W1 or a W2.
Yeah,
Or party like 1980s, like whatever you want to do.
and to your point, I think I agree with you. I guess what raised the question is, when in the context document, when you're talking about the number of rental permits, and are held by investors, property owners who rent multiple properties that they use exclusively as rentals, not as homes. So if a owner like Claire and them living in the winter, that's a home. So how is that being an investor? Is your account, is it a primary dwelling? Is it a home? Because you're saying that these investors are not treating these as homes, well, if they're living in all that.
We live in all the
Is it an investment property for 6 months and then 6 months it goes back to being a residence?
Something, I don't
The
know.
primary dwelling?
Yeah.
or whatever a home is.
It's just not clear in this document, so I'm kind
You want to break it down.
That's why,
That's the fine word.
probably, that's why, dwelling, might clarify really the discussion and what that, what we're talking about. Because then you home, private, one thing.
Question about renting one room in your home. Is that allowed? Is that considered a bed and breakfast? Maybe I missed.
I believe it's a tourist room.
What is it? Okay, so it's listed on Airbnb's, and you can rent as many, okay.
Every one of our families are, own houses here, all, so at least a month, so that's, we don't have a client that exclusively. That's their house, family stay, or at least about our house.
A lot of the people on the island that have just one rental live in campers for the summer so that they can rent it out in the, you know, in the summer and make money to be able
Some
to
people,
build
yes.
out.
And some of the young families. They have a couple of them, so. You need that.
I have a question about campers. Like, if I would like to rent a camper out, that is on properties that I live on and own. Can that be allowed in this, or is that not?
Long-term rental, yes.
Which is more than 7 years.
Yes.
The camper is considered an incidental dwelling. And that's, you look under incidental dwellings. That they're only allowed long-term rental.
Is this the document that a provision would be made to rent it for less time,
Rented for what?
for less than 30 days, like? 7.
Not an incidental dwelling. They're only, you can only rent them long-term.
Yeah, the current zoning ordinance prohibits incidental dwellings from being rented at all. And we added them for long-term rentals because, you know, a lot of employee housing is in campers.
I have a quick question about campers too, because I own trailers that certainly do look like campers, but I've got to be inside to turn them into patrol trailers or other things. You know, nobody lives in them, but I have slide outs in and things like that, so I can utilize the space. You know, a mobile shop and things. Would that be considered a camper, or would it just be a?
It's your personal property.
Just a trailer?
It's your personal property.
Just because it looks like.
You're not living in it. A camper is something that's occupied for more than 30 days out of the year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But to clarify, the provision was made in this document that varies from zoning. To rent it, to be able to rent it
Long-term.
for long. So this is the document, if the provision was going to be made, that would allow it short term.
The current ordinance does not allow short-term rentals for incidental dwellings at all. We added the long-term rental of incidental dwellings to this draft. But not short.
Right, so if it was going to be added anywhere, it would be to this document.
Probably.
But this is about fear of the future, because it's really not a problem that I see. And that's like,
I agree with that.
this is about boogeyman, right?
I believe everything like it is. I will have to stop all events on rental property because it's not legal right now. And anybody that's renting campers out long-term, we're gonna have to kick their renters out because current ordinance does. Pardon me?
You're gonna hire someone to do that, an employee?
Well,
That's what it sounds like. Just beyond my.
or just ignore any of the ordinances altogether and just.
Very few people do that. I think we have a lot of over the years. Well.
Explore the idea of just limiting the homes and one. Instead of limiting the days even rent them out, say an arbitrary number, like you can't own more than 6 homes. As well, or something like that.
Yeah. Reasonable.
Not under state law, no.
The state law does not, it does apply, I understand that, we live in Wisconsin, but this is a very unique community, you've only been here a short time. You don't have no blood, sweat, and tears here.
So that's illegal under the state law. It's to
Yes.
limit the amount of homes you can rent out.
State law does not allow you to restrict the ability of a property owner to rent their dwelling for 7 days, for
From
less than 7 days.
No matter how many dwellings you have.
Correct.
Okay.
So we put a caveat in this, like, if you own more than this many houses, then people can buy.
I don't think we can even put a cap on the amount of short-term rentals on the island.
Not under state law. I mean, some states allow that, some communities allow that. It's not the reality we deal with.
Different states have heard that it was limiting it and it didn't work out. No.
Limiting what? The number of investment rental dwellings that one person could own.
You have 100 rentals in the city of Duluth, that's it, once the 100's done, no one else can't get a rent permit, and it went for about a year and that was it. It was pitchforks and tars and everything else.
So it's really.
So we can't limit the amount of rent.
That would protect the competitor, wouldn't it?
Correct.
But you can do what you want, you don't have to pay attention to the state, you're saying you have the power to do that. But why wouldn't we just cap it? I agree with you.
I would just, but I'm not taking sides that it's not educated enough from the staff and the questions.
So Ron, if I understand your statement, you're telling us that the town should disobey state law.
You have the power. Yeah. So,
But you were also worried about how much we're spending on attorney fees. Okay. I just want to make sure that I understand you correctly.
you have an answer for everything, Michael. Smooth guy.
Thank you.
Took that compliment, didn't you?
I did.
Wow.
Can you help me understand the difference between that accessory dwelling and incidental dwelling? What is the state make those definitions? Is that what I'm reading here? The accessory dwelling definition and incidental dwelling definition, page 7.
These were definitions that were in our old ordinance. And we've just included them here and added some language to them to make them more separate.
Did the other document have incidental structure as well within its definitions?
I believe it did.
And are you going to merge that in with one of these two definitions or?
There's basically
They look like they're so close.
Yeah, there's
and
3 types of dwellings on the island. You got your primary dwelling. Incidental dwelling, which would be like a guest cottage. And then, or not incidental, isn't it? Accessory dwelling, yes. Yeah, it would be the guest house, and then the incidental dwelling, which is a camping unit.
And that, because that's highlighted, that was one of the additions to that definition. Making sure that it's understood that the incidental dwelling is to specifically include a camping.
It is a camp. Yes.
Next document, you talk about 14 and all roads. Versus district. According to your definition that you have in here. A building in which lodging Those are without meals and office, transient guest compensation, in which there are 5 or more transient occupancy units, each not exceeding 400 square feet. I believe it's. I don't know where you come up with 14 hotel rooms, because the only building I know of that would meet that definition would be the motel. That's a 6-room hotel. Where the 14 rooms come from in your numbers on your context document? That's
Certainly the farmhouse, certainly the Lightkeeper's Lodge. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the database. I mean, this was done a couple of months ago.
Okay. You bring it as a note as one of the permits are, so we'll try and understand what the importance of that was.
Trying to show a breakdown between the commercial district and the residential districts.
Okay. And of the 18 permits that are in the commercial districts, how many buildings does that represent?
I have to go back and look at the database.
Can we find that out for the 33 residential ones too, or is that 33 that you're saying? 33 are in residential and they are owned by investors. It seems really high to me.
I'm not sure. I don't understand your question. Are you saying
you're saying that there are 30?
You want the locations of all the quote unquote investor properties in the residential districts? Is that what you're asking?
Well, you're using it as part of your documentation to make a decision on percentages. So I think it's a
right. So am I understanding your question?
Yes,
right?
I would like to be buildings that way.
Well, if it's 33, so some of them would probably be fairway suites. The rest would be essentially, individual parcels.
But you call them single family households in your document. That wouldn't be a single family household. Well, maybe you guys are using numbers, because if you're coming up with a percentage of how many, you're taking 150 units and you're saying, what is it, 1/5 of our housing stock is already in rentals. That would be, if my math is right, that'd be 715 individual properties. I think we have more than 750 on this island. There's 1,700 parcels.
But based on what the assessor considers a residential property, that's what that number is based on.
750.
Whatever that number is.
Well, you said 1/5 of the island's housing stock.
Roughly, yeah.
For the property 750. So what about if there's what if there's an accessory dwelling on that building? Around that property?
I don't have the database in front of you. I can't answer these kind of specifics.
Okay. Yet you use these percentages for discussion.
I don't have the database in front of me. I'm sorry. If you want to come in, I can walk you through it, but I don't have that ability to do right now.
Currently, you only can rent either your accessory or your primary meeting.
Yeah, you can. I thought you said you have your accessory dwelling you can rent, but then you can do your main house as well. Not early, but in this.
The existing ordinance is in violation of state law, so we switch that for the new ordinance.
Following state law.
Right.
Say that again, so.
Our old ordinance, you could rent either your primary dwelling or your accessory structure, but not both. That was in violation of state law.
So now you can rent
Rent them all.
Currently a separate.
people do it now, building. I have a quick question on, looking on page 14 of the second draft from the TPC. Under letter G, bullet point 3, I just have a quick question about how we came up with a 20-minute arrival time to an issue on the rental property. I mean, I like the bullet point. I'm not arguing with the bullet point. I'm just saying 20 minutes, it's 40 mile an hour speed limit. If there's a problem out in the north end and you're here, how how can I get from the point to Chippewa Trail in 20 minutes? How can any person driving 40 miles an hour? I'm just wondering if maybe we should change that wording to hour and a half. I don't know, because 20 minutes is not very much time to get from anywhere on that, especially if there's like a dump truck or something in the way, things are gonna get, or there's a marathon. Like sometimes there's marathons or inline marathons or other things, so maybe. I like the point, I'm not arguing the point, I think it's good to have a property manager on the island. Accessible, but if we're gonna have it in like hard words, maybe we should make it easier.
And possibly responding is a phone call,
Oh, okay, not like getting out there to get it done.
possibly a response to the phone call.
Okay, right, like, yeah, okay. Cool. Thanks, Eddie. It's a good response.
One other thing, you talked about investors. Well, our entire inventory, 95% are generational homes. Are investors,
No, you're misinterpreting the ordinance.
but this is what are doing.
I'm sorry, what?
You're worried about the new investors.
Again, this document, this document does not define investor. We are using investor as a term to explain to people how we are making a distinction in this ordinance between people who have one short-term rental property. And if I'm understanding you correctly, Ron, typically those are people who have generational homes that they, we heard a lot from those people in March.
But not everybody
so-
works in that usual, sorry.
I understand. So you don't actually own those? No, right, so you're not an investor. So those are different.
So Ron, so those homes are not at all affected by anything in this ordinance. It's people who own multiple rental properties.
Okay, so play a fair investment of their life in these small properties. You want to restrict them. Started from nothing, and that is the fact, that's what you're saying. And I know the mother that you're looking at alcohol.
There are about a dozen people who own multiple rental properties.
I don't care.
So to say that we're targeting someone, I think is unfair.
So people aren't here, but they're coming.
Ron, I think you also have to look at the fact that according to state law, the town does not have to allow any rental for less than 7 days, right?
Well, I know that.
Okay, so we could say we go by state law and nobody can rent for less than 7 days. We're trying to help the community and all these, pardon, let me finish. Okay. We're trying to make it legal for people to rent their property for less than 7 days. And that's probably what, 90% of the owners of property on this island?
Yes.
There is a small portion that are multiple properties. Okay, those people are the ones that we don't want this island to become an investment island where people are going to come in and buy up properties from the people that you serve right now and turn them all into investments. We don't want that to happen. That came out of the comp plan. That's one of the things in the comp plan that we're trying to work with.
Can I slide in here for a second, Jim?
Yes.
There are properties being built right now on the island that are being built exclusively for short-term rental. And so I'm just saying, it's happening. I mean, we know who's coming in for permits. We know what they're doing with those properties. And so. Yeah, so to say that it's not a problem is maybe not being familiar with the trends going on in the island.
Are we able to go back to the attorney and talk about those dozen local, business owners on the island that do multiple properties and talk to the attorney about every, like, going through the box and every option that we have to potentially help or differentiate, in the big word, differentiate them. Investment firms or have all those options been explored, or was that like a big area of focus, or is it worth revisiting and talking to the attorney, spending more money? The attorney. But maybe worthwhile. That's an option.
This gentleman's name that was sitting at the corner back there.
Peter Havens.
Peter. It sounds like what he was suggesting was that we put in the matrix and certain zones that investor properties, if they would like to rent them for less than 7 days, it would require a CUP. Sounded like what he was suggesting.
I know Quinn was concerned about this 20-minute window. Why don't you just make it like an hour or something?
That's he just sets a call for that, so he doesn't have to be there.
Make it an hour anyway.
Oh, okay.
We have 100% service on the highway, it's all right.
Conditional use permit limit investment properties?
Pardon me?
Would a conditional use permit limit investment?
Well, it would give you permit if the conditions would allow it.
Oh.
You know, if you were granted a conditional use permit, you applied for one, to use that investment property, say you had more than multiple properties, and that one was restricted to 7 days or more. If we somehow made it a matrix so that you got a CUP, that, and if the CUP was allowed, then you can use that property also. I think that's what he was suggesting.
That gives your neighbors a chance to say yay or nay,
Yes.
and this guy wants to make sure there's not parties.
No, I'll tell you, a CUP nowadays is just like a permitted use, except that the zoning board can put conditions on it, and they have to be reasonable conditions. Denying a CUP, you're probably gonna end up getting in your butt for it, even if the neighbors are opposed to it.
Okay.
Yeah, Governor Walker is from this change that,
Act 67.
yeah.
Page 14, whether G. I'm sorry, no, it's fine. First time I've seen this where Alan's asking for all short-term rents to be an additional insured for $1 million. And why was that typical for a town to do that? And then
We put that a lot in almost all of our contracts because people will always sue a town because they think they have resources. And the rationale why they would do that is they would say, well, you issued a permit. And so you therefore are vouching that whatever about this property, and something bad happened and you as the town are responsible because you issued the permit.
and how would you be enforcing this and making sure this gets done on a yearly basis?
It would be part of the permitting process in theory, that as part of the paperwork you would file, you'd have to have insurance companies issue these routinely. It's called certificate of insurance.
I know what it is.
Yeah, and they just put the town as one of the additional insured. So I'm guessing that's practical way as to how it would be implemented.
An additional cost,
No,
there's no additional cost to this.
no. It takes the insurance company 5 minutes.
You do it on an acorn form and email it. You go to the airport for all the hangers.
Alex, you guys.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's an answer to Brady's question about getting more advice from the council.
I just feel like it might be a nice compromise, to be like bringing a third party or. Might provide a better answer to. Biggest question.
Well, I guess it's hard. I mean, we've talked to the attorney about what can we do and what can't we do. And the attorney has basically said, this is what you can do. You can't distinguish between where a person lives. Can't distinguish on how many properties they own or how many properties they are renting, as far as distinguishing between categories, for example, like some people have suggested. So if folks have other ideas as to what might work, yes, we can float that by, but you can't, it's difficult to go to the attorney and say, how do you make this legal when it's already, I mean, how do you like language in here legal? When it's already legal? How do you make it more legal? I mean, I'm not sure how you provide that kind of open-ended question. If people have specific suggestions, could we do A, could we do B? I think we'd be willing to, you know,
Yeah.
go to the town attorney and say that, but we haven't. The ideas that have come out of this discussion, we've asked, and we can't do under state law.
That would be a good question, yeah.
Grandfathering would be legal.
So would you be willing to include in the language on this that current businesses operating would not be under effect of this?
As long as they don't buy any more properties. And turn them into short-term rentals.
I'm just trying to live my.
And turn them into short-term rentals. So the idea is
Cover
to,
in what we have, and I'm fine with that. But yeah, other people.
Maybe having people have suspicions and submitting them and then we can prevent the meeting. Good idea.
For any instance where states like Wisconsin will come in and enforce it, because we weren't enforcing it, but the state come in and enforce it. I think the state law. And imagine that's happening either, but just.
It only takes one person to raise a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have to be the state, it would be an individual, perhaps a neighbor of somebody who's.
Yeah.
Whose short-term rental had a party they didn't like, and then they realized that the town is in violation, the town's ordinance is in violation, and then they would sue. And so whether the state would do it independently, probably not, but
That was something best.
there's no more questions.
So I'm gonna comment, so if somebody's afraid that some of these residential areas have short-term rentals are then gonna be an event space. I can understand they're not wanting that to happen. But could that property still not just be a rental? Yeah, not be allowed to have the event in a residential area. Nobody wants a big party out on South Shore Road. But they want the house to be able to be rented because their neighbor owns it. You know, they don't want 100 people show.
Matrix, low density areas are the only areas in the draft that are allowed events on rental property.
They have to get a permit.
And they have to get a permit to do it.
I mean, as long as Artie's having his Christmas party, I think this discussion's arbitrary. So he.
On private property.
that's his own property. He's not using his property as a short-term.
Right up. I mean, he's doing it, it's a business operation, so.
It doesn't matter.
It's a party,
It's the personal use of the party. It's just like when Mike talked about people want to have weddings on their own property. There's nothing to stop them from doing this.
Right, this is all it is, I was a member of it. That's it, it's not a problem.
One problem with having events on low density stalls, you have 100 people, is it still low density? The definition of low density is not a lot of people, 100 people, to me is a lot of people. And just because you have the space, doesn't mean, well, they can spread out, typically, no, they're in by the house or wherever. If it goes against the comp plan with this, go back to nature, we like a piece of pie, yada, yada, yada. But all of a sudden, you can have 100 people show up at a W1 or W2 zone and have a party, or it's weather event. Or more, because we're gonna count this.
Like you said, try it for 2 years. See where you guys end up.
Yeah, that part of the
Yeah.
draft is a pilot.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you right now, if in a W2 zone, if I have someone with a raging tender going on, and I think there's more than 100 people that I'm calling up whoever approved this ordinance on the town board, and they can come out and help them count bids. I mean, the buck's gotta stop somewhere.
Is there any evidence from other places that having a limit of 7 days actually restricts investor buying in properties?
Yes.
Nantucket, York County.
It's, we know, there's some evidence that it does have a side effect.
Is-
And then
Oh, go ahead.
the second follow-on question is, what I hear being said is that, and I don't have a stake in this, but my question is, if you are really trying to avoid investors buying up a lot of properties, what is the end game of that? What is the impact that we want to avoid by not allowing that?
Nantucket.
I don't.
Cost of living, sense of community.
My daughter lives in Holly, and that has happened over the last 5 years, where foreign investors are buying properties as they come up for sale from families that have had it 5-6 generations. And the median price of any property there has gone from affordable, for people working at $250,000, to up to $700,000-800,000 for the same property in 3 years. And it's only because of the revenue they can generate by putting it in rent.
Thank you. I said heard that articulate about, okay, really trying to solve. Yeah, and I think the people that have properties here would agree that they don't want to see that either.
No, not at all, but at the same time, each of those places you're talking about, Nantucket, now they all are city next to population centers, so over 250,000 people within an hour or less. Whereas our nearest population center of 250,000 people is Chicago or Minneapolis.
And they all come here.
Well, they do come here, but it's still,
40 years.
but I mean, it's not the same, you don't have the same. It's, you're comparing apples to horse apples at this point, it's not the same comparison because we don't have the same population centers anywhere nearby. I mean, Duluth has got 80,000 people, that's nothing.
I know people in Chicago and a 10-12 hour drive to them is nothing. Coming up here, it's like, oh, it's only 10 hours away. I'll just go 70. They go to Door County first. Yeah, they can hit Door County and ruin that first.
I understand where you're coming from, but I just don't see it being there yet.
And if I may, Clayton,
Yeah,
I think we've answered questions back and forth a lot.
yeah, thank you.
Yes, and we do have the public hearing coming up for opinions and stuff. And all of that will be taken into consideration before we take this draft to the TPC.
Right on. Appreciate it.
And this was a good conversation back and forth.
Good job, man. Yeah.
Remember myself, I gotta look it up. Doesn't bad. I know.